Really glad to be here today to talk to you a little bit about my strange obsessions. I'm a retired linguistics professor, and most of what I work on is American Indian and Indigenous languages. And I basically work on all aspects of them, and I especially like working on dictionaries and teaching materials for people who want to learn about their heritage languages. That's a lot of what I do. So I am really a language junkie. I'm a total addict. I really just love learning about these languages, and I hope I can make it interesting to you. So here's a slide with some of the languages that I've worked on. The ones that I feel are sort of current, where I'm working actively on them now, are in red. And I'm not going to go through this. If you have questions about anything on this list, just ask. But you're going to be seeing some more about most of the languages that are in red there. So I have two slides about how I study these languages. The type of study that I like best, because it involves personal interaction, is analysis of the data that I collect in fieldwork with native speakers. And I've done quite a lot of fieldwork in the languages where, the locations where languages were originally spoken, in many areas of Southern California, in Arizona, in Oklahoma, in Oaxaca, Mexico, and in Belize. Very often, however, this fieldwork takes place in Los Angeles, which is a city with many, many, many speakers of indigenous languages of different parts of the world, and we're blessed to have it, so many speakers of languages from the Americas. So this might be either in my office at UCLA, in the speakers' homes, or in another location. You may know that there's a park in West LA called Stoner Park, which I think is such a hysterical name for a park. I used to work there. There's a, where they built the new development near USC, there used to be a food court there. I used to go there and work with someone. I used to do work in a Methodist church in downtown LA. Currently, the main place that's not, well, the main place in LA that I go is the View Park Library, county library. And then a lot of field work takes place in what are called field methods classes that I've taught at UCLA for both undergraduates and graduate students. A field methods class is a class in which linguistic students learn how to gather data that they will analyze directly from a speaker rather than from books or tapes or something like that. And it's a truly wonderful experience. Since the pandemic, a lot of fieldwork takes place on Zoom. So this is pictures of some of the people that I have worked with or now work with. The person that I have done most fieldwork for the longest time with is Mrs. Catherine Willman in the top left, a speaker of Chickasaw who died in 2022 at the age of 10 days short of being 100. And I had worked with her for 45 years. And she was a fabulous lady. That's us outside of Campbell Hall. The top right is Dr. Amelia Chukin, who is a speaker of Imbabura Quechua, who I started work with in a field methods class. Then for a long time I was working with her in one of the pods right over here in the library with some other colleagues, and now we work on Zoom. Bottom left is Dr. Felipe Lopez, who now teaches at Seton Hall University. I met him when I was a UCLA undergraduate. I was on his graduate committee, and his language, a variety of Zapotec, is a language that's truly fascinating, and I'm still doing some work with it. Bottom right is the late Maurice Lopez. That's the gentleman that I used to work with in the food court at USC, but there we are in one of my many offices at UCLA. That's actually in Royce. And then in the middle, this is my biggest current project. I'm working on several projects with the Garifuna language from Central America, and there you see me with Martha Martinez and Ben Flores, who are two wonderful speakers of Garifuna that I work with, and you'll hear more about all these languages, I think. And here's a picture of a field methods class. This is quite a large field methods class. It was at the Linguistic Institute in, I'm sorry, I just noticed that there's no clock in this room. Oh, but I see this clock. I have a clock. The Linguistic Institute at UC Davis in 2019, where we were studying Fijian, and which is a fabulous language, not a language of the Americas. And most of my field methods classes at UCLA have been much smaller than that, but it was a great class. So here's my second slide on how I study these languages. I also study two languages in particular through the analysis of archival materials, because these languages no longer have speakers, and you can only study them through records that were made when there were native speakers. So one of them is Colonial Valley Zapotec. That's the language that was spoken in the Valley of Oaxaca. It's the ancestor of Dr. Lopez's modern Zapotec language. And it's known to us through documents of various types from the 16th through the 18th centuries, written in Zapotec by scribes who had been trained by Spanish speakers. And these documents are now all in Mexican government archives. And then finally, Tongva, which is the original language of the Los Angeles Basin. There used to be Tongva speakers right where we are here, and the nearest Channel Islands, like Catalina. This language probably has not had native speakers for at least 70 years. And there are no audio recordings of this language, unfortunately. But various linguists, principally J.P. Harrington, wrote down a lot of Tongva, and all of his notes that are known, I do believe there are probably more lying around somewhere in a warehouse or something, and I hope we find them, but the ones that are known are now in the archives at the Smithsonian. And, okay, just to show you the kinds of things that we deal with in the Zapotec project, it's probably kind of hard for you to read the document at the top. Part of what we do in this Zapotec project is what's called paleography, which is reading very strange old Mexican handwriting from 1568. I'm not going to go through this. It tells you what it says there in the first two lines. But if you look on the second line of my analysis there, you'll probably be very interested in the way they say 1568. So they say 3 times a word ela, which means 400. That one word means 400. So 3 times 400 is 1200, plus this next word, which means 300. 1200 plus 300 is 1500. And then 60 and 8, just the way we used to say numbers in English. So that's how you say 1568 in this language. It's a base 20 system. That's why the 300 is 3 plus another word, but the ela is a single word that means 400, because that's 20 squared. So you don't often see numbers in base 20, and that's kind of neat. Here's a sample of the Tongva project with a complete translation. What is transcription. What is interesting about this, besides the fact that J.P. Harrington's writing is much, much better than 16th century Spanish, but it still takes a little getting used to. Here, over 100 years ago, he was writing down that they used the word Tongva to talk about these people. And this is important because there have been people who have challenged the use of the word Tongva, saying that it's a made-up word, or it wasn't really a word that was used, or various other things. But this is a wonderful piece of evidence. In fact, it was used by native speakers, so we should use it too. Okay, so things I do technical linguistic studies of the grammar of many languages, the kind of thing that scholars do. I work on many dictionaries. A number of these dictionaries are still in progress. You saw a picture of me and my two Garifuna colleagues working on an online dictionary. The Quechua one is also online. That's what we do on our Zoom meetings. But the other dictionaries here, several of which have been published, are all print dictionaries. I personally think print dictionaries are really useful because they allow you to flip through them and find things that you really couldn't find if you were working with an online source. You can see what words are near to another word rather than just looking at one word at a time, which is common in online platforms. And also, it is still the case that many people in this world do not have the internet, and the people that I make dictionaries for are primarily either speakers or descendants of speakers, and many of them don't have access to the internet, so print dictionaries are really important. I also work with community language groups. I've worked a lot with several of these ones here. I'm not currently working with a Chickasaw community study group, but I do teach current classes on Tongva and Garifuna that are also on Zoom, mostly to people here in LA, but the Tonga class has people from all over the state of California that participate in it. And then finally, I'm mentoring a Tonga transcription project. A Tonga woman is working with Harrington notes like the ones you saw, trying to transcribe every single Tonga word that is in them and put them in a big database that is managed by people at Miami University in Ohio who are working with projects with a number of different representatives of different language groups who are trying to transcribe all of their archival materials. And then finally, I mentor a group of Chickasaw language teachers who are not speakers and who know less about Chickasaw than I do. Mostly I help them with things like tricky grammar questions and pronunciation. So they need work on pronunciation, and it's really nice that I can work with them on that. And then another thing I do is every 2 years since 2004, I've taken part in what the Breath of Life Archival Institute in Berkeley, which this is a picture from 2012, and I'll be doing it again this summer in Berkeley, where linguist partners, they've changed the name, we used to be called mentors, but now we are partners. Linguist partners work with community partners on learning about languages of California that are no longer spoken. So California is a part of the world that had an enormous number of indigenous languages at the time of first contact. We don't know really how many there were. There could have been as many as 100. I mean, many, many, many different languages were spoken in California from many different language families. So when I say languages, I mean, completely separate speech varieties that are not mutually intelligible with the other things that I'm calling languages. They're not dialects. And many of them were grouped into family groups, but others are in other groups and not at all similar or related to those. So normally when I've been at Breath of Life, I've been working with Tonga people who want to learn about the archival materials available on Tongva, like Harrington's notes, which I showed you a page of. Anything else that we can find that talks about Tongva. And then what they want to learn is they want to learn how to read Harrington's notes, which are written in linguistic phonetic transcription, which is something that ordinary people on the street cannot read. It uses strange symbols, kind of like the symbols that are used in dictionary representations of pronunciation, but it's a different system. And people have to learn how to use this system if they want to use these archival materials and be able to learn from them. And the ultimate goal is for them to be able to develop teaching materials that they can use with tribal members who want to learn about the language. Something that I want to say to clarify is I am not an anthropologist. Many people think that because I study these languages, I must be an expert on their culture. And I do know quite a lot about most of the cultures of the languages that I study, but I just sort of picked it up. I'm not an anthropologist, and I don't work with anthropological methods. But because I love the people whose languages I study, I certainly have opportunities to experience things about their cultures. So in November, my husband and I were privileged to attend the annual Garifuna Settlement Day Mass in South LA, which commemorates the settlement of Garifuna people in Belize, and traditionally it's on November 19th, but in Los Angeles it's always on the preceding Saturday to November 19th. So this is what you may have heard being played earlier. We had problems with the sound. So this is from the Mass. It's the Gospel Acclamation. Probably most of you have seen a Mass or been to a Mass in your lives. In sort of formal Masses, often people will carry a big Bible down the aisle in this, but it's sort of like more intense in a Garifuna Mass. So in Garifuna they were singing, "Oh Jesus, we're here, come and hear the word of God." And a Garifuna Mass, at least a very formal one like this one, typically has, how many would you say, 3 or 4 different processions down the aisle, where there's drummers, there's sometimes dancers, and many singers. And the whole congregation, rocks along with it. It is just a fabulous experience that, it's part of Los Angeles culture. What can I say?
For the offertory procession, they'll bring gifts of food.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Packaged cereal and stuff.
Right. It's something that is really indescribable, but you've seen a little bit of the music. It's wonderful, yes.
You said they originated in Belize.
These people are mostly from Belize and Honduras. They didn't originate there.
Are they still there today?
Oh yes. In fact, Alan and I were in Belize last week, and I was studying Garifuna there. Most of the study of Garifuna I do in Los Angeles, but I try to go to Belize once. Belize is a lovely place to go, even if you're not studying Garifuna. I try to go once a year and work with speakers there who are sort of more into the Indigenous mode. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you about several different little things about grammar that I think are really fun and interesting, just sort of to show you the kinds of really neat things that I have discovered in working with these fabulous languages. And please interrupt or put up your hand if you have a question about something. I think we have plenty of time, and I'd be very happy to explain things further if they're not clear. This section is the addictive lure of grammar. That's me. So my first fun thing is about Zapotec pronouns. So the pronouns in Dr. Lopez's language are attached to a preceding word. So here they're attached to a verb. And what's interesting about this language is that it has 6 different ways to say he, she, or it. In English we have these 3 words, he, she, and it, but anytime you want to talk about a masculine person, you use he. Anytime you want to talk about a feminine person, you use she. And anytime you want to talk about something else, you say it. So they have, for saying he or she, most of these can't be used about an it. They have these 6 different words. So each of these sentences means he killed the rabbit, It's got the word killed, and then a pronoun is attached to the word kill, and then the word conech, which is obviously a loan from the Spanish word for cottontail. So all of these languages have lots and lots of borrowings because they've been in contact with English or Spanish for many, many years. So the first one, if you said this, the he that you would be saying he killed the rabbit about would be God or a saint or a very specially revered person. With the second one, it's one step down for that. This is a hierarchy of respect. So it's one step down from that. It means a respected adult. You would use the second one with, if you were saying that the person that killed the rabbit, you were referring to a teacher, a doctor, or your parent. The third one is the next thing down. It's somebody who is a member of the community who participates in all the responsibilities and things of the community, but isn't accorded the same respect that, say, a teacher or a doctor would be. Probably this person is male, but it doesn't have to be. The next two are used either for a non-Zapotec, so if one of you had killed this rabbit and they wanted to talk about it, they'd use one of the next two, the fourth or fifth words, depending on whether you were nearby or not. The first one is for somebody nearby, the second one is for somebody further away. And you can also use this for like a friend or somebody that you know very well. And then finally, the last one is what you use for an animal or a child or an adult who you don't owe any respect to at all. So, when I discovered this, I was just really blown away because I never had encountered a language that had different levels of respect for pronouns. It just seems so strange. Okay. So the next one is something that came up in doing Chickasaw translation with my teacher, Catherine Wilmond. So the word hashik in Chickasaw, if you look in the dictionary, it says it means either sun or moon or month. And obviously the month word is derived from moon, like just in the same way as in English. And you can add extra phrases to hashik to specify sun or moon, but usually people don't. They just say hashik. And if you're outdoors after dark, you figure you're talking about the moon, and if you're outdoors in the daytime, you figure you're talking about the sun. So something that I have done with speakers of a number of languages is to translate the song from the Small World ride at Disneyland, which I imagine many of you may well have been on, into Chickasaw. So maybe you know the line that goes, "There is just one moon and one golden sun." Okay, so I worked with Catherine on translating that into Chickasaw, and what she came up with was Hashiat Togolo Nittak Ochlili. And what that means is there are two hashik, day one and night one. So, it's like saying there are two suns or there are two moons, but there are two items that you can identify as either the sun or the moon. One expert on these languages uses the term luminary to mean either sun or moon. I don't use that word because I don't think it's a really common word. Another thing that's interesting about this sentence here, Hashiat Tokolo, is that Tokolo is a verb. It's the word for two, and you use it if you're counting, like one Tokolo. But it also is a verb, so we can inflect it. We can say, there are two of us by putting the we agreement marker onto Tokolo. So we are two, meaning there are two of us. Okay, now my third fun thing is longer and more complicated, but I think you're probably up to it. So Garifuna has two what are called sociolects, which is a word I didn't know until relatively recently. That means a dialect of the language that is not identified by location. So we think of, like British English or Southern English as dialects of English. But this is every social group within the language community might have a sociolect. And in Garifuna, there are two of them. Neutral speech, which can be used by everybody and is always used by women and also children. There aren't many children that speak this language anymore, unfortunately, but everybody sometimes uses neutral speech. And then there's something that we call men's speech, which is now used only by very conservative older men. And older male speakers who are not quite as conservative, they may use some aspects of men's speech, but maybe they don't really use the full-on type of men's speech. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about men's speech and how it works, and I'm going to show you a way in which men's speech is part of the grammar in quite an odd and weird way. So one difference between men's speech and neutral speech is that they use a few different words or a few different forms of various words. So for instance, the I and you pronouns are completely different for men's speech and women's speech. So the men's word for I is au, and the men's word for you is umura, versus nuguya and buguya are the neutral speech words for I and you. And here are some other words, other common words for which there are both neutral and men's speech forms: man, woman, yesterday, and now. There are a few more, but not really very many. I have investigated this with a number of people and looked at all the lists that various scholars had made of what are the men's speech words. The reason that there are these two types of words is that Garifuna is a language from a family primarily from northern South America called Arawakan. But there was a time in the history of the Garifuna people that they were conquered by a group of people speaking a Carib language. Carib is a different language family from Arawakan. That's primarily a language family from the Caribbean. And the conquerors were male, and they got the Garifuna ancestors, the men, speaking at least some of their language. And so the words that remain in modern Garifuna that are now associated with men's speech, if you compare them with words from a Carib dictionary, again, this is a completely different, unrelated language, that's where they came from. So they were borrowed into Garifuna to form the men's speech vocabulary such as it is. Okay, so Garifuna has grammatical gender, just like in familiar European languages. This is quite unusual in languages of the Americas. It's the only language I work on that has standard grammatical gender opposition between masculine and feminine for all nouns, very similarly to Spanish, at least just in having this opposition. Otherwise, it's not like Spanish at all. Most parts of the sentence agree in gender with nouns, although nouns themselves don't contain any clues to which gender they are. So if you know Spanish, you know that lots and lots of Spanish masculine words end in O and feminine words end in A. And that's just a thing about Spanish. Garifuna doesn't have anything like that. So when you learn a new Garifuna word, you have to learn what the gender is. There's nothing about the sound of the word that tells you what the gender is. So here's an example of feminine and masculine subject-verb agreement. I'm putting feminine markers in pink and masculine ones in blue, just to help you. There's an association, I hope, there. So when we say Jane is happy, gunda to wana. The to on the end of the verb gunda, which means be happy, is a feminine ending, as opposed to when I say John is happy, I can say gunda ti wang, and the ending there is T, so the TI is the masculine ending. And so we can see this with some inanimate nouns. I mean, so names obviously have the gender that you would associate with them, and most words for animate creatures, like people and animals, don't have different forms for the different genders. Like, you know, we have different forms for things like stallion and mare and stuff like that, but for most animal nouns, for instance, you don't have different forms for the masculine, the male and female ones. And it's the same in Garifuna, but they can be treated as either masculine or feminine depending on what the animal is. But inanimate nouns like books and tables don't have, they have a fixed gender. So when you say the book is read, funatu garda, the word garda is a loan probably from, well, I'm sure it's from either French or Spanish. It might be more likely to be from French because of the changes in the consonant sounds, French carte, but it might also be from Spanish, I'm not really sure. But anyway, that is a loan, and just to show you that loans work the same way. So books, for some reason, are feminine, and so we're using the same ending on the verb be read that we used on be happy when we were talking about Jane. Tables in Garifuna are masculine. If you're thinking about European languages with gender, you may be thinking that tables are often feminine, but they're not in Garifuna, they're masculine. And so we're using the same ending on the verb there that we used when we were talking about John. So animate nouns like bird, dunuru, take plural inflections. So the first sentence there means the bird is red, and we're obviously talking about a feminine bird because we're using the feminine ending to. And if we want to say the birds are red, we don't change the word bird, but we put a different ending that's the plural ending on it. But inanimate nouns are never, they don't trigger plural marking. So when I say funatu garda, the book is read, that can also be interpreted by any speaker as meaning the books are read. And you know, in a particular context, people would know whether you were talking about one read book or a bunch of read books. I don't think it would be unclear. So, as I mentioned that feminine inanimate nouns like book are inanimates, ambiguous as to whether they're plural or singular. So, as we said, funatu garda means the book is read, also can be the books are read. Masculine inanimate nouns like table work the same in neutral speech. Funati dabla, the table is read, the tables are read. And that's the way I, as a female speaker, would say that. And it's also the way that many men would say it if they weren't sort of in their men's speech, wearing their men's speech hat, which you have to be an older, very conservative male speaker. But older, very conservative male speakers do something really strange, which is that in men's speech, masculine inanimate nouns take feminine agreement when they refer to more than one thing. I know this is kind of complicated and strange, so funati dabala, the table is read. That's the way any neutral speech speaker would say it, and also any men's speech speaker would say it when he's only talking about one table. But a men's speech speaker talking about more than one table would say funatu dabala, the tables are read. And you would know he was talking about more than one table because he would use the feminine ending on the verb. I am very happy to take questions about this if you're finding this too weird. But what is strange about this is that there are many other aspects of the grammar in Garifuna, which I'm not, this is about the simplest one. I picked a really simple one to try to give you a feeling for how truly strange this is. In men's speech, often something that in neutral speech would be considered to be masculine is treated as feminine grammatically. And there are many, many other aspects of the grammar where they do the same thing. And yes, the way you're shaking your head is exactly the reaction that everybody has. So, yes.
When a man speaks to a woman, does he use, which language form would he use?
He'd usually use men's speech if he's
And she would understand that?
Oh, yeah. And women might use it too, like if they were quoting a man or imitating a man or making fun of a man. I mean, women all know these forms. It's just they don't use them because they're considered to be men's way of speaking. And, you know, I mean, I regard this as really, really strange. Anybody have any other questions about this? I mean, I think it's, yes.
Okay, so you said this is an outlier, this gender nature of this language among the indigenous languages. Is that
There are not that many. There are other indigenous languages of the Americas that have gender, like Garifuna, like the familiar European languages, but it's a small minority.
So English is also kind of an outlier in modern days because we're not gendered.
Right.
So, I mean, if you construct trees of what's gendered and evolutionary or whatever you call it in linguistic trees, I mean, is there any logic to this? Did something come first and something come later?
Oh, I think the gender came earlier, and people just lost it for some reason or other. So it's much easier to talk your language if you don't have to think about making every part of the sentence agree with the gender of one noun in the sentence.
So we're just lazy speaking English?
Oh, I think there are many ways in which many people would say English speakers were lazy. I mean, English developed from a language that did have gender. So older varieties of English, like German, did have gender. In fact, they had 3 genders.
And Norse?
Sure, they have gender. So, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think in all the cases that I know anything about, languages with gender developed into languages that didn't have gender. And why that was, I don't know. I mean, it may indicate something about, you know, earlier forms of language liked to analogize inanimate things to living creatures. That may be part of the reason for the development of gender systems, but I don't know. I'm not an expert on anything like that. Any other questions about this? I mean, to me, it's just really, really strange. I used to teach Linguistics 114, which was a class in which students learned a lot about indigenous languages of the Americas in general, and they learned a lot in particular about one language, because I would have a speaker, one of the, like Mrs. Willman, the Chickasaw lady, did this, and one of the Garifuna speakers that I showed you, no, 2 of the Garifuna speakers whose pictures I showed you also did this in different years. And they would come, the speaker would come to class 1 day a week and work with the students on learning to pronounce their language and learning something about the grammar. Well, when we got to this fact about Garifuna in the Garifuna classes, and people learned things like this business about if a man says funati dabula, it has to mean only one table is read. If he wants to say the tables are read, he has to say funatu with a feminine ending, dabula. When they learned this, they were blown away the same way that you were. I mean, it's just a really, really weird fact, I think. And they spent quite a lot of time trying to think of reasons why this might be true. Yes?
I'm really curious, historically, through the history of languages, and the fact, and tied in with the economic times, in order to do this, I would think that a person has to have a certain intelligence to do the gender.
Well, I mean, you know, every speaker of Spanish, for instance, manages gender just fine. I think when you're an English speaker learning a language like that, you think, how can people possibly remember to associate, masculine or feminine with this noun? But I mean, if you look at Spanish speakers, even children or people who you would regard as perhaps not very smart, they all get gender just fine. I mean, it's the part of the grammar that is built in for them. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think from the point of view of a naive English speaker, it seems like they must be really smart to be able to do that. I mean, sometimes Alan will see little kids speaking German or Spanish or something.
French, which I have trouble with.
Yes, and he'll say, boy, they must be really smart, those little kids.
I just think of the power of women controlling the language. It's a different view culturally too.
Yeah, well, that gets me to the point I wanted to make, which is that when I introduced data like this and even more complicated, I mean, there are many even more complicated ways in which in men's speech, if you're dealing with a plural, masculine, inanimate noun, you treat it as feminine. Why? When I introduced these facts in 114 to students learning about Garifuna, one of the things that they were very interested in was to try to come up with reasons why this might be true. And nobody ever came up with anything that made sense to me, but they had a lot of ideas about, I know there was one girl one year who really felt that this showed something about, feminine domination. And, but why would a male speech speaker be, bamboozled into exhibiting feminine domination in his speech, whereas women didn't do it? This doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. None of these explanations that people came up with ever made any real sense to me, but it's such a strange thing that it's interesting to try to wrap your head around it. Any other questions or anything about this? Because I know this was a little tricky and strange. The one thing that I want to end on, talk about, is land acknowledgements. So all the land that we live on in the United States used to belong to, although they didn't believe in things belonging to them, the earlier indigenous inhabitants. So these people didn't own land, but their communities had traditional claims on it from what we now say, if we're talking about such claims, as we usually use the phrase time immemorial, because that means that we don't have to get into, when do we have records of people actually living in this place and stuff. So these are claims that our government, the federal government for most part, ignored or abrogated. So there were many treaties that we went back on. So in academic circles and some other venues, land acknowledgements can be placed after email signatures or on websites. So this is a land acknowledgement that I use in an email. So if I have this email, that's my fake email at the top, then down at the bottom there is the way it shows on an email that I send to somebody. So it says, I acknowledge the Tonga people as the traditional land caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and the Southern Channel Islands from time immemorial. So when you do a land acknowledgement, it refers to the land on which you are working and living, which used to be land of other people. And for some reason, there has been a big effort in the kind of post-Project 2025 era to consider land acknowledgements woke. Here are some quotes that I found dating back to 2021 about what land acknowledgements were. So this one guy in the Atlantic called it moral exhibitionism. This other guy in the Wall Street Journal, the latest woke ritual. This guy in the Living Church, which is a Christian publications, pseudo-penitential acts of self-congratulation. And then this one from Newsweek is just really incredible. All of human history has been the displacement of one people by another. No one has a claim on land except if they put it to productive use and are capable of defending it. Now, there is a strong statement, right? In fact, land moving to a higher valued use is the premise on which most wealth creation and human flourishing is based. I think a lot of this, would have been quite useful to President Trump in making the arguments that he's making. And then he finally says, the United States paid for many of the lands it took then and now, which I know of actually no evidence for. I don't know who M. Todd Henderson is, but I mean, this is just an amazing quote, I think. And let's see. Sometimes people go sort of like over the top, however, on land acknowledgements, and apparently this is specifically true in Canada. So I didn't know this until I started looking, when I was preparing these slides, I started looking on the web for, searching for woke land acknowledgements to see what I could find for quotes like this. And a lot of them were from Canadian outlets. So apparently in Canada, there's been both more use of land acknowledgements and more outrage about land acknowledgements. So a friend of mine who recently retired from UCLA and now lives in Toronto sent me this land acknowledgement. This is hysterical. This is a very, very, very long land acknowledgement from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. I've never seen anything like this in this country. I mean, so the very short sentence that my land acknowledgement is quite typical of land acknowledgements, both by, you'll see many UCLA departments now use them and people in various fields. But I can't believe that anybody ever used anything this much. So they would put this at the end of every email. They would put this at the bottom of every website. I mean, it's just sort of like, do you really expect people to read all of this? So I think when you read this, you can see why there has been sort of more revolt against the idea of land acknowledgements in Canada. So, it's crazy. Did you guys all know about land acknowledgements before?
I did, but sorry, I'm from South Campus, and I've never once heard or seen a land acknowledgement, never in any seminar, never in anybody's email. I'm sure that's an exaggeration. There must be some people somewhere. Whereas in North Campus, it would be unusual not to have a land acknowledgement.
It's a very humanities-oriented
And
thing.
so I don't think, the extreme cases that you mentioned, I admit, are extreme. But I think the problem that I see with land acknowledgements is not what it's acknowledging, but the need to acknowledgement just because it's saying something about you yourself, not about what's true, what isn't true. So I think that's the problem that I see with land acknowledgements. It says something about the person doing the acknowledging.
Well, I think that's true about what these quotes are saying.
Yeah, on both sides of the issue. And it is, the faculty on North Campus and the South Campus have different things they want known about themselves. And I think that's where land acknowledgements come in. It's personal opinion.
No, I think there's certainly something to what you say. I don't think I would agree with you that it's as common in North Campus as you say. I mean, I think some people do it. Maybe not as many to me it doesn't seem like that many. The reason that I do it is because I actually work with Togwa people and I have an affiliation with the American Indian Studies Center. And I feel that if I did not do a land acknowledgement, it would be a bad thing. And, to me, it is worth pointing out to people that the UCLA stands on land that once was inhabited by Native peoples and isn't anymore. And we don't know all the reasons why that's true. But, it goes back hundreds of years. but it's, you know, it's something that maybe is worth bringing to people's attention. But I think your point is a well-taken one. So that is all I had to talk about. I have actually another set of, you know, sort of like another kind of problem which we could look at if you want, but maybe people have more questions. Yes?
Could you pronounce each of them?
Sure. The Chickasaw is Yakoke. The Quechua is Jusilpagi. The Zapotec is Chosnlag. That means thank you guys. The first two are not, there's no plural attached to them. The Griffina is also thank you guys. Sareme Nia Hu. And the Tongva, there's a story too, Aweshkonecha. What that means is I am happy. So our notes on Tongva are very restricted. We don't know the answers to lots and lots of questions about Tongva that we wish we knew. This guy, J.P. Harrington, who did a lot of the documentation of Tongva, he was very kind of almost whimsical. He would sit down with the speaker and he might have a list of things that he wanted to check that he had seen in some other document or something. Somebody wrote down some Tongva words, he wanted to see if they were correct, or he remembered asking about something on another day. But sometimes he just sort of goes merrily from one topic to another without really asking all the things that would be useful to know about a particular type of sentence or something like that. He never looked into things that were longer than a single sentence. So there are many, many things we don't know how to say in Tongva. We don't know how to express, you know, sentences with two parts, like I saw the man who sang. We have no idea how to say that. I tell people in my class, if you want to say that, you can say, I saw the man, he sang. And it kind of gets that idea across, but not completely. We don't have a word for thank you. So it is true that there are cultures that don't use a word for thank you. When my Tongva class wanted a word for thank you, what I did was I wrote to all of my colleagues in the department and I said, if you have a way that people say thank you in a language you know that doesn't use a word thank, because we didn't have a word thank, what's the way that they say it? And so I took back all the suggestions that people in my department had made about ways that you might express gratitude to my Tongva class, and the one that they liked best was to say I'm happy, which is what Aweshkonecha means. So the last one there means I am happy, and we use it to say thank you in Tongva. The only Tongva, what linguists call a text, which is a connected speech of more than one sentence, the only thing like that, we have two. We have a little dialogue, and the little dialogue, this is from Harrington, it says, one person says, what is that dead body? A man? A woman? And other person says, a woman. So there's 4 sentences. What is that dead body? A man? A woman? A woman. So that's the whole dialogue. And that's the longest connected speech event that Harrington recorded. We do also have the Lord's Prayer as written down by mission friars at probably Mission San Gabriel or maybe Mission San Fernando. We're not really sure which one it came from, but probably San Gabriel. This was written down most likely around 1800 or a little bit later than that. And the people that wrote it down didn't leave us any information on what they meant by the spellings they used, or what the literal translation of it was, because obviously, it's not going to really say the exact words that we use if we say the Lord's Prayer. So I have been working since I got the copy of this Lord's Prayer text, which was more than 20 years ago. I've been working on trying to understand exactly what the words mean, and I think I do understand it pretty well now. There are some things that are a little bit weird about many aspects of it, but you know, the Lord's Prayer is not very long. It's like 10 sentences, something like that, and that's the longest thing. Most of the languages of, well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of the languages of California, we have much, much more data on, and people recorded stories in them and stuff like that. Harrington apparently never thought it was necessary to ask a Tongva speaker to tell a story, and so we don't have anything like that, and that's too bad. Yes?
I'm curious about the demographics of your class in Tongva, not just in terms of numbers, but the demographics, the numbers.
There are probably about 20 people who come most of the time to that class, and all but about 5 of them are ethnic Tongvas, so they are descended probably quite remotely from people who did speak the language. Not as near as grandparents, maybe great-grandparents, more likely great-great-grandparents. The other people are people who are not Tongvas, but they're people with some linguistic background who are interested in the language. And these people that are now coming to the class range in age from high school age to as old as me, or maybe even a little older. So it's a very broad spectrum of people.
Do you know nationally how many? I would imagine there aren't that many institutions that teach Tongva.
I don't know any other institutions that teach Tongva. Yes?
Sorry, I don't mean to dominate here.
No.
So I'm interested in what makes languages survive. It sounded to me like you felt like this Belize language you study is pretty much going, because you said there were no youngsters.
Well, there are children learning the language in Honduras, I am told. I have not been to meet them. I've tried to find, people occasionally will tell me there are child speakers in Belize, but every time I have tracked these people down, they just knew a few words, or they knew some proverbs or something like that.
So I remember in Belize, my memory is not so good anymore, there was a lot of English being spoken. There was some people speaking something I didn't understand, which perhaps is what you're studying.
It depends on what part of Belize you were in.
I also remember Mennonites in Belize, and that surprised the heck out of me.
There are a lot of native languages in Belize, so
Is
there
their
are...
language still going? They arrived with what, something like Dutch maybe?
The Mennonites speak their variety of German, and they have been here since, well, probably for 100 years or so, and they are really big on agriculture, and in the northwestern part of Belize, you see people in Mennonite dress who are selling produce.
Do they still speak their Germanic language?
I have not interacted with them, but it is, if you look up like Wikipedia or something that tells about the languages of Belize, German is one of them. So the other languages, German is not one of the languages that's spoken in the Garifuna village that I go to do my work, but in addition to English and Garifuna, they also speak Belizean Creole, which is an English-based Creole that, for me as an English speaker, is quite hard to understand. So, I mean, it is based on English. It uses primarily English words, but they are used in a way that is not at all easy for English speakers to understand. So I've never made any study of it, but that's hard. There are Spanish speakers. There are speakers of a Mayan language, Mopan Mayan, in this community. And strangely enough, there are also Chinese speakers. So in Belize, every grocery store is run by Chinese people. I don't know why this is true. But you can hear Chinese very easily in most towns in Belize if you go into a grocery store. But I've never met a Mennonite in that part of Belize. So Garifuna is spoken on the Caribbean coast, primarily in the southern part of the Caribbean coast of Belize.
Well, the Mennonites have been very itinerant over their history. And I mean, they had a big presence in Uzbekistan. And, you know,
I
they
didn't
just
know
brought,
that.
yeah, they did, they just brought stuff with them everywhere. And I think, I mean, I was told in Uzbekistan that they were Dutch. Now, of course, Dutch is Germanic, so maybe it's all one language group, but it's just stunning to me.
Yeah.
Where these people end up in the jungle in dark clothes.
No, you're right, you're right. Any other questions? I think we're out of time. But thank you very much.
Mhm.